This podcast was recorded on traditional Denizal land.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Before the Peace. Right off the bat, if you're a long-time listener, you'll notice that this is a new voice on the show. My name is Greg and I am filling in for Trey in this episode as he's taking a temporary leave of absence. On this episode, I sat down with Catherine Ruddell, who owns Creatively Sustained in Fort St. John. Catherine is a certified Cultivating Safe Spaces Facilitator who helps businesses and organizations create safe spaces using a decolonizing framework. In this episode, Catherine shares her history with the Peace region, what led her to start her business, what safe spaces are, and how they are beneficial for everyone. Before we get into the episode, however, I have some housekeeping. Before the Peace received an email from a listener, so thank you so much for sending that in. In their message, they mentioned that they would like to hear more about Kelly Lake and their history, more about Soto First Nation and how they came to the area, and more about the lived experiences of people who do the work to connect their culture/community after being disconnected. Thank you so much for the email, and we will try our best to tackle these topics. If you want to send us a message or a question, you can do so through beforethepeace@energeticcity.ca or go to energeticcity.ca/beforethepeace. Also, let's send a shout out to our sponsors. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the help of Troyer Ventures. Troyer has been serving our community and the energy industry with tank and vac trucks since 2000. They are built on the principles of hard work, service, and community, and they are proud to offer their financial support to make this program possible. Also, thanks to our other sponsor, Fort St. John Co-op. The Fort St. John Co-op is a locally owned cooperative in Fort St. John. The co-op's primary focus is providing premium lubricants and petroleum products to its member owners. It regularly donates to local charities and organizations. Now, on to the episode with Catherine Ruddell. Let's start. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Tanse, Catherine Nasikasam, Nimiotan and Axkatan. So in Cree or Northern Michif, I just said, hello, my name is Catherine, and I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming in. So let's start off with, what is your history with the Peace region?
Well, before I get started, I want to just acknowledge that I was born and raised here, and it's the lands of the Daneza and Treaty 8 territory. And while I have Indigenous ancestry and I am Métis, I'm also a guest and a treaty person here on these lands. My Métis ancestry is maternal, and it's on my mom's side. And our family names include Testowich, Winniandi, Lorian, Lafleur, and Thomas. My mom's name is Lorianne Ray, and she was born here in Fort St. John. My grandma was also born in the Peace region in Spirit River, Alberta. Her mom, my great-grandma Sarah, was born in Smoky River. And then her parents were from the area of Jasper House. So a lot of my family is from northwestern Alberta. And my Indigenous ancestors also include Haudenosaunee or Iroquois people. So they made their way west from the area of Montreal and they traveled through the prairies with the fur trade. And they married Métis women, and then they made their way along to the Rocky Mountains and then up into the Peace region. So I also have English and Welsh heritage on my mom's side. And then my dad also grew up here as well. He was the late Brian Ruddell. He moved here when he was a boy from Manitoba. And my grandma on my dad's side, she was a war bride. So she came to Canada after the war with my grandpa. And my grandpa and his family, they were settlers in Manitoba. And they brought their family over here in the early 1950s, I believe. And my settler ancestors on that side of my family are from England, Scotland, Ireland, and France.
A little bit from everywhere, eh?
A little bit from everywhere, yeah. And it feels like a lot, but it's important for me to share who I am and the people I come from because it helps others to understand my relationships to this place and my ties within the community. I've also been a member of the local Métis charter community for many years, and I am a member of the Métis Nation of BC as well. But I'm not only Métis. There's a lot of diversity in my Indigenous family relationships and ancestry. And that's where this idea of kinship and belonging also becomes important because sometimes our family trees aren't linear. And I have many different relatives and they didn't all come from one specific place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's the more globalized we get, right? And it's interesting to think that even within Canada, there's a lot of diversity for people who've been here a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So growing up, I think I had a fairly typical Métis upbringing in the sense that I don't know that there is one.
Yeah, fair enough.
The Métis people are a diasporic people, which means like they didn't all stay where they originated. And Métis people were on the move a lot because of settler colonialism.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it was never a secret in my family that we had Indigenous ancestry. My grandma and her brothers, they were born in Spirit River, but their family moved to Fort St. John in, I think, the early 1930s. And they were raised on a family homestead in Grand Haven, so above the old fort. There's a road named after my family in Grand Haven. Yeah. But it's no longer publicly accessible. So it's called Hallway Avenue. That was my grandma's maiden name. But now it's behind a lock gate within the Shaman Industrial Park. And the land that my great-grandfather homesteaded is basically where that large gravel pit is now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And anyway, my grandma and her brothers, as I said, they were all visibly Indigenous. And then on family holidays, we would go to Alberta and visit like other aunts and uncles, extended family members. And they also were Indigenous looking as well. And that was just what we knew as family. And we were a mixed family. And so, you know, there was never any expectation that everybody should look the same. Another thing too is we didn't have a lot of cultural teachings passed on to us, even though we knew we were Indigenous. Nobody in my family was a beader or taught me how to bead. I learned how to do that in a Zoom room. You know, but my family were really big into gardening. And one of my aunts always had a massive garden. And it was a very communal place growing up. So I grew up thinking that everybody helped their aunts in their garden. That's just how we visited each other. And it's also part of the way I engage with like my culture and learning now too. And it really informs the gardening program that I started in partnership with the city of Fort St. John this year.
Oh, that's really cool. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So the garden program is called We Grow Rainbows, and it's about connecting diverse youth. We've actually opened it up to be all ages, so we invite adults and elders to join as well. And it's all about connecting people to plants and the land by growing food.
That's awesome.
So I love to grow food. I love to cook. And I think, too, that building relationships and community is a really important part of that as well. And with the city, we applied for a grant through a provincial organization called Plan H. And it's also part of BC Healthy Communities. So they helped fund this summer program. And coming up in late August, we're going to have a harvest camp. So,
cool.
Yeah, we have 4 days before school goes back in. We've planted a bunch of vegetables, not only on my property, but we have a couple of garden beds at the local community garden at the Catholic Church there. So we're hoping that all of this abundance of food grows, and then I'm inviting participants of the program to come and harvest it. And then we're going to be renting a kitchen facility, and we'll cook together and we'll all share in a meal together. So
that's really cool. What do you think about gardening that really brings people together?
Oh, we all need to eat.
Yeah, fair enough, eh?
And I think too, it's I think once you have a garden and you recognize like it doesn't always go as planned, I think you start to also appreciate the amount of hard work and luck that actually goes into sustaining.
Yeah, it's not just you plant
it.
seeds and then you're good to go.
Yeah, and you gotta hope that the weather's on your side. I think farmers can probably relate to that sentiment a lot.
Well, that's really cool. It's a really cool program.
Yeah.
And it's a really neat way of merging where you are currently with your ancestry, right? So that's really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. The Métis were definitely farmers. I'm just excited to share that with others because I think gardening's pretty cool. Yeah,
no, my wife's really into gardening, and I try to pay attention and get into it. It's not my thing, but she enjoys it so much, and it looks like so much fun. So that's awesome.
And it's a great workout. It's free gym.
Oh, really? You get some fresh air too. Go from there.
Yeah, exercise your back.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, with my grandparents as well, we camped a lot. Camping, I think, it's still pretty common and a lot of people do it, but it was also something we did with my grandparents here in the Peace region and then also a little bit south. But my grandma also, she took us berry picking throughout the year in the summer. So like locally, we'd pick Saskatoons in the River Valley. And then we would always camp at Bear Lake, which is just north of Prince George. We'd always get blueberries there. And then another interesting spot we would go is to Dunvegan, and we would go to the U-Pick strawberries at the commercial garden there.
That's awesome.
And this has a bit more significance now that I'm an adult. I didn't really realize it when I was a child. But just knowing that's the place where some of my Métis family members signed for script was at Dunvegan.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's it feels really meaningful that even though it's a couple hours away, my grandma would take us there for the day. And that's a memory I have of visiting places with her. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I just think is really interesting too about this Peace River connection is there's some historic buildings at the Dunvegan Historic Park, and you can go and tour them, and there's lots of plaques to read and stuff. But there's this old timber building there, and I think it's the church, but it's made from these really large logs, like exceptionally large.
Really?
They're over 12 inches big square or something. And so when you think about how big those timbers are, like the trees that they came from would have been massive. And I think the structure itself is well over 100 years old. So those trees then, when they were standing, they would have been like 200 years old or something. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But I share this story because I feel a real sense of like reverence when I go there and I look at like the timbers of that building. Not because it's a church, but more because of what remains of those trees. And I just think it's really fascinating. They were once like living on the land, and they would have been witness to generations of Indigenous people in that place before settlers came into the area.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So I also believe that the more traditional or cultural teachings, they weren't passed on through my family. And that's also because of the effects of colonization. So my great grandma and her sister, they lost both their parents in the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, 1919. And we believe that they entered the care of the Catholic Church in Spirit River because they were both still teenagers at that time. Okay. We patched together a bit of the history of what we know and also make some assumptions about what family just didn't want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the kinds of things I remember about my Métis family and growing up in the Peace region. And there's a real sense of connection to this place more broadly because the Peace region also straddles the border. There's the BC piece and the Alberta piece, but I really hold this idea of visiting people and visiting places as being something important that my grandma passed down to us.
That's really cool. Yeah. So on your website, it says you have worked with large corporations, managed small businesses, and been a director for a national nonprofit. What has your career trajectory been like, and what encouraged you to become a certified Cultivating Safe Spaces facilitator?
Yeah, I like to say that I've had a really creative career path. It's nonlinear. It's been different. And I used to feel like a little bit insecure about that, but I'm quite grateful for it now. When I graduated high school, a lot of my close friends had just very stereotypical kind of careers. They went and got 4-year degrees and became things like nurses and accountants and doctors and engineers. And then I was doing, it seemed like a creative diploma every couple of years, which was fine. It was just different, right? Like you recognize that the things you're pursuing they don't fit the prototypical. And so when I left Fort St. John after high school, I didn't think I would ever come back.
Oh, wow.
I was an artsy kid, a creative kid, and it was a hockey town. So I just was really excited to get to Vancouver and just explore everything it had to offer. And I studied art history for a year at Capilano College. And then I got a fashion design diploma from a school called Blanche Macdonald. And then I worked in Vancouver for a number of years in fashion design. And it was an interesting experience when you're a young art school kid or a student, and employers know that it can be quite competitive. There's not a lot of those jobs. And I felt quite fortunate to find a job for a really big clothing company at the time. They were based in Vancouver, but they had overseas production. And so I really got to learn a lot there. But I also agreed to a salary that I found out later was below the poverty line when my brother did my taxes.
Wow.
I remember getting like an MSP rebate. And I'm like, why do I have this extra money? Like, why? And he's because you make so little money, you don't have to pay for medical services.
Oh my gosh.
So it was this eye opener because I get a paycheck and I work in a fancy building and it looks like a cool job. But that was also, that experience too, was where I first bumped up against professional burnout. Working a lot of hours, a lot of overtime, unpaid because I was on a salary. Salary wasn't meeting my needs. So I incurred a fair amount of debt. And I think too, when you're younger and you're trying to prove yourself and show up in a workplace like that, you're also just not aware of the limitations of Go. And so I ended up leaving that job. Long story short, I ended up back home in Fort St. John and was just like working to pay off my debts. And then I ended up becoming involved with the cafe. So Whole Wheat and Honey Cafe in 2008, it was started by two cousins in January of 2008. And I came on to work as an employee in March of that year. So they'd only been open a couple months. Very quickly, they realized they were going to outgrow their original location. So they signed a lease for where the cafe currently sits now, which is the corner of 100th and 100th. And when we signed that lease, or when the owner signed that lease, it had been a gym and it had been gutted. So it needed to be like fully outfit as a new business and a restaurant. It needed a kitchen. It needed a dining room. With my design skills, I was like spearheading the layout and the look of the cafe alongside the owner. And then we ended up hiring a contractor, and him and I got along, and we've been together for 16 years now.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Crazy how life works, eh?
Exactly. Again, non-traditional. I don't have kids. I don't intend on having kids, but I feel like Whole Wheat and Honey it's my teenager creation. It's 16 years old now. I'm no longer involved with it, but for a good 5 or 10 years, I was really involved in a number of different ways and was eventually a co-owner of the business.
Wow.
And then I forget the year, 2016, we sold it to a staff member. And then it recently was sold to its third owner now, just earlier this year. Yeah. And I like to think that Whole Wheat and Honey was this original safe space that I helped create and be a part of in my hometown. At the time, there wasn't really anything like it. We've had different cafes in town. This one was much larger than the latte places we'd had. It had a different feel. It had a real artsy vibe, and there was a lot of live music happening there in the early days. And it really did just feel kind of magical that it existed in Fort St. John, and I got to be a part of it. So
yeah, no, it's definitely, like you said, it's a certain vibe that you don't get very often up here. And I've heard lots of people from out of town say, oh yeah, I know about Whole Wheat and Honey. Every time I go to Fort St. John, that's one of the first places I stay at, because I feel, like you said, it has a very specific vibe that people appreciate and enjoy. So
yeah, and whenever I meet people, there's a lot of business travelers in this town as well. It was a great place to meet them because it's near the hotel downtown. So it was a really great place to just build relationships with people, locals, regulars, and then we would have folks coming to town on a regular basis, like every month or every couple months, and just getting to build relationships with people that don't even live here was really unique too. Yeah, I really appreciated my time there.
that's awesome. And then, you said, like I said, so that's the managing small business. It also says that you work with large corporations, and as well as a director of a national nonprofit. How does those fit into there?
Yeah, so this is more recent in the last, what is time? I'm trying to
no, it's been a blur the last couple of
timeline.
years for sure.
But around 2019, I became involved with an organization called InPath.
Awesome.
2020, I went back to school to finish my bachelor's degree in communications. And then around the time I was finishing my degree, there was a staff role available at InPath. So I had become aware of them and worked with them as an artist in 2019. So I actually did a 6-week artist residency in the EUSG, which is a Cree community in northern Quebec. And I was living in community and teaching my art practice at the time. It was printmaking on textiles in the high school there with Indigenous students. And so fast forward, I finished my communications degree and they were hiring for a head of storytelling at the time. That's how I entered the organization, was a communications role, storytelling, sharing the impact of the work we were doing externally. And by the time I left, I was director of storytelling and culture. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I learned a lot there. Just about relationship building and how to do that remotely. I worked here in Fort St. John for a company that was based in Montreal.
Wow.
And then the communities we worked with were primarily Indigenous communities all across the country. So really gained an understanding for just how important relationship building is, as well as recognizing that no nation and no community is exactly the same. We all have really unique perspectives and influences from where we're raised and the culture of the communities we live in too.
No, it's really exciting. What was the What's the time zone difference between Fort St. John and Montreal? That would have been interesting to deal with.
You know what? It wasn't bad. And we switch half the year,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah, I guess so. Eh?
So half the year it was 3 years, half the
Hours.
3 hours, half the year it was 2 hours.
Okay,
and,
not too bad then.
And I'd start my day earlier, which I think is pretty common in Fort St. John because of just Alberta and time zones. Yeah. So if I started at 7 and finished at 3, it still felt like a normal work day. A lot of people work that shift here. So.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the time zone wasn't as cumbersome.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, with technology nowadays, it's a lot easier to get a hold of people than it was, a long time ago. And then, we're in Path. You said you started that in around 2020. And then how many years did you work there?
Actually, I started my degree in 2020.
Oh, okay.
And then I started at Empath full-time in 2022.
Okay.
And then I worked there until last September. So I was there, I feel like I was involved with them longer than I was an employee. But yeah, I worked there for a year and a half, just about 2 years. Yeah.
Nice. And that kind of brings us to today. So tell us more about what you're doing nowadays.
Yes. So now I'm self-employed and I am a full-time facilitator. And I also just finished an Indigenous coach training program. So I do facilitation and coaching, and I do that under my business, which is called Creatively Sustained. So my business actually started as an art project. It was a bit more conceptual. So around 2015, my partner and I had the opportunity to become involved with the City of Fort St. John Passive House Project. And we were living in the house for a couple of years. They were wanting to monitor the energy use data. And in order to do that, they needed someone to live in it like normal people. So my partner and I did that. We turned on the laundry and the dishwasher and the lights and all of the things that happen in a working household. So during that time, I also was on the cusp of transitioning out of the cafe, and I really wanted to get back into my art practice. And so I did a lot of explorations while we were in the house, and Creatively Sustained was the title I gave to the project that I was working on. And it involved a lot of self-reflection on my identity and heritage. Like I did a lot of reading about who my family was and really just rereading a lot of the documentation that my grandma left behind for us when she passed away. My grandma had a genealogy search done around the time we were teenagers. Her grandkids were teenagers, because she learned that there may be financial support for us to go to school. She didn't make it past grade 6 or grade 8, I forgot, but it was important for her that if she could help us out that way, that she do it. And my grandma had a genealogy search done through the Glenbow Museum and Archives, and that search returned birth certificates, baptism and marriage certificates, as well as 5 script certificates that members of my family had signed when Treaty 8 Commission was in the area in Dunvegan. And as an adult, I hadn't spent a lot of time like sorting through that stuff and figuring out what it really meant. So it was part history lesson, part art project, part what am I going to do with my life now? Yeah. Because my one project I'd been a part of, which was the cafe, like it was selling. We were actually in the process of moving as well. So when our term at the Passive House wrapped up here, we actually moved to Prince George so my husband could pursue his master's in engineering. He's a Passive House consultant, and he did his master's in mass timber construction.
Oh, cool.
So I also came from the cafe, which was hospitality is a real women-dominated sector. It really like centers relationships, customer service. And then I was thrown headlong into construction consulting with my partner, which is a very different, it's male-dominated, and it's a lot about architecture, engineering, construction. It's a lot about like precision and logical reasoning, which not to say that doesn't happen in other sectors, but I just recognized that I was a different person in these two spaces. I was perceived differently, and what I had to offer and contribute was valued differently. And so fast forward now, I registered my business Creatively Sustained as a sole proprietorship in 2020. And I really now see it as this way to conceptualize a more holistic approach to work and my career, as well as ways of being and ways of showing up in spaces. Our dominant culture tends to really center the mind and value what you have to contribute intellectually and what you can achieve. And an Indigenous worldview as well is a much more holistic. If we think about the medicine wheel, it's got physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects. And we work towards balance in each of those, or we don't privilege the mind over all of these other aspects of who we are as humans. So Creatively Sustained now means to me that I honor all those sides of myself, and I don't try and fit myself into certain boxes or certain spaces or certain ways that I sometimes have felt expected to be or expected to fit into.
No, I think that's a really cool way. You want to have that balance in life and have that, not like you said, not just, it's not all about mental and that type of stuff. There's multiple aspects of life that people need to recognize and aim towards. So let's get more into creatively sustained. With creatively sustained, from what I understand, you're trying to cultivate safe spaces in businesses and organizations. Is that correct?
Yes. So Creatively Sustained is my business, and what I facilitate is a training and a decolonial framework called Cultivating Safe Spaces. So Cultivating Safe Spaces is really important work, and it really does, I think it really resonated for me. Like I said, I've been involved in diverse sectors, and I've been involved with a lot of different people and different ways of thinking, different ways of showing up, different ways of being in the world. And I think that this framework offers us a lot of really valuable tools that not everybody is familiar with. And I think that it's really important work that we can all do no matter what space we show up in. So I facilitate for workplaces and organizations, but I really do think these tools can be implemented in families or in community groups, volunteer groups, anywhere where you are engaging in relationship with humans and trying to get along and trying to share ideas and trying to communicate. I think it's a really helpful framework in that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy to think like almost everything we do involves other people. Like it's very rare that you do something that's 100% by yourself, not involve other people.
Yeah.
You got to be able to create those safe spaces to integrate everybody's ideas and work together.
Yeah.
So when it comes to safe spaces, why do you think it's really beneficial for companies and organizations to cultivate these safe spaces? What's your main benefit you offer them?
There's actually a lot of studies and literature around psychological safety in the workplace. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but we do talk about the brain, and it is a trauma-informed way of looking at interactions, interpersonal interactions. And it's also decolonial. So it really uses examples from a colonial society and the systems that we live in a compare and contrast kind of way. So it's about learning all of these ways that our dominant culture has said we should show up. Here's how you're supposed to act. Here's how you're supposed to do X, Y, Z. And if you don't do that, you don't follow the rules, there'll be consequences. And so that essentially, like, it erodes trust. There's not a lot of safety or belonging in that kind of like dominant hierarchy of managing people. And if we look at the workplace, if psychological safety does exist, if people do feel like they can trust their coworkers, or they can speak up in a meeting and share an alternate way of looking at something, or just feel like their contributions won't be met with ridicule, then you're going to hear more from people, right? You're going to be able to elicit valuable feedback from the people you're working with. And when we don't feel safe to do that, things just sit under the table. We sweep them under the rug. And then folks who don't feel safe to chat, you don't get their valuable contributions from their unique lived experience. And we know as well that this idea of certain people are marginalized, certain people experience different kinds of microaggressions or oppressions in the workplace based on their lived experience or the way they've been racialized. And what really resonates for me about this framework, and why I think it's important for workplaces too, is that when we feel safe, we actually do our best thinking. If you're chronically under stress, or like chronically like looking over your shoulder, or having to send that email because you don't trust that if there's not a paper trail, nobody will believe you that it happened, or it won't get acted on, that impairs the delivery of work, the completion of projects, and it really affects morale. And so creating psychological safety in the workplace, which is ultimately what Cultivating Safe Spaces gives people tools for. When we're feeling safe in our brains, we actually have access to our most executive levels of thinking, where we do our best problem solving, where we are able to come up with the most innovative or creative solutions, and also be able to communicate with greater influence because there's trust and rapport that exists in the conversation we're having. And when people don't feel safe, they operate from a place of fear or doubt. They have troubles making decisions because, oh, what if it's the wrong decision? What if this happens? I know that this person has reacted this way in the past. So coming into a workplace and facilitating this training it gives a team a common language.
Yeah.
And it gives a team different concepts to investigate together, right? There's a series of protocols that we investigate. Here's how we want to treat each other. I really think about it as like the ways we conduct like ourselves in community. Self-reflection is a big part of this work as well, because the more you understand yourself and where you come from and the things you've been through, then the more you can start to recognize what might raise your temperature, how you might have to be aware of, okay, this is something I have experience in. This is something that I know is sensitive for me. So if I'm entering a conversation about this, how am I going to remind myself that it's up to me to regulate my emotions? It's up to me to, like, if things get too intense, like I can go to the washroom and take a deep breath and just like maybe even wash my hands under cold water and remind myself that this is just a conversation, right? And we all have those things that we're sensitive about based on our lived experience. Yeah. And that's really the trauma-informed part of the framework. It's common for people when we're dysregulated or when we're triggered to say, oh, like you made me feel that way. Yeah. But we each also have a responsibility to recognize it's up to me as well to leave situations that aren't healthy for me. And I really think too that my experience in the workplace as a young woman, burning myself out, I've come to recognize as well that nobody's role is more important than their own personal health. And I think too, a lot of my work as an adult now has been recognizing what I'm capable of, recognizing what I'm willing to put up with or what I'm willing to like work on and negotiate with others, and when I'm willing to leave spaces that just don't feel safe for me.
Yeah, no, that's really important. All of that was very fascinating. And I really like the idea behind it too of we're all humans, right? We all have experiences. We all have our own lives outside of work, but then we come together to work and it's all about how do we create a space that's safe enough for everybody to work there. And I think that's a lot of things that people, especially historically, don't think about, right? They just think, oh yeah, you just clock in at 9, leave at 5 and just deal with whatever comes up. But it's really like, you spend 8 to 10 hours at a place every day. You know, you got to feel safe where you work and feel like you're able to contribute to what you're doing and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important for people to think about that of, like you're saying, like, how do we have things structured now and how that can go against some people's personalities and some people's the way they work and stuff like that. So I think it's really interesting trying to cultivate those safe spaces to create it. And like you said, it's beneficial for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, not just the employees, but also the employers.
And we are humans. Yep. I think for a long time, work was about showing up and doing your job and removing these personal aspects of who we are while we're there. But if you are a parent and you're in the sandwich generation where you might have teenagers that you are navigating you know, life with, and then you might have elderly parents that you're also navigating changes in their life too. Expecting someone who is juggling a lot to be able to be at their best all the time, it's not feasible. We're not the same every day. Our capacity fluctuates. So it's actually impossible for us to show up and have the same capacity every day at work, to have this stasis. Like stasis in the ecosystem is nothing's constant, right? Like we're a part of a web of life that grows and evolves and shifts and changes in order to stay alive. And it's this idea that we are all capable of a lot, but we're not capable of everything every day in the same ways. Yeah.
It's impossible to give 100% of the time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just like we know in nature, like diversity in ecosystems is incredibly beneficial. Each living organism has its own role and it serves a different function. And people are also incredibly diverse. We come with different lived experiences. We come with different educations, different interests, different abilities as well. I really have been learning a lot from friends and family members who are perhaps neurodivergent and have come to know that as adults and are recognizing ways that they might ask for accommodation or ask for things to be delivered in a different way so that they can work with that information in a good way. So why would we deny them that? It's just adapting is something that species do. And so I really see adapting to diversity as something that's quite natural. And it's actually the systems level of thinking that where it becomes difficult.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how, like you're saying, us as humans are diverse and want to adapt and stuff like that, but we create systems that don't want to adapt. They want to be the exact same thing.
Are slow to change.
So it's important for us to acknowledge that and work towards adaptation. And like you said, it's really fascinating, like you're saying, like the full medicine wheel aspect of it, of acknowledging there's multiple aspects to people and organizations and trying to make sure they're all balanced for everybody to be enjoyable. So you, in your description on your website, it says that the decolonization framework was developed by Elaine Alec. Would you be able to provide more context on how you met her and became certified?
Absolutely. Yes. So cultivating safe spaces is not my body of work, though I do deliver it through my own unique perspective. And I bring a lot of my own lived experience to my facilitation of the framework. But Cultivating Safe Spaces was developed by Elaine Alec, and she is a Syilx and Secwepemc woman. She's a member of the Bonaparte Indian Band. She grew up outside of Penticton. She now lives in Kamloops. And I found her on the internet during the pandemic and just started following her Instagram. And she's a great storyteller. And so I learned a lot about her and her experience. And then I realized that she had this framework, and at the time you could go, and I did a weekend training with her, and it was incredible. I had been waiting for someone to say the things that I'd been feeling and didn't have a language for. And so just after doing that weekend training, again, I was on her newsletter, all of these things, all these ways we keep in touch with people digitally. And then I realized that she had a Train the Trainer program coming up. Elaine developed this work as part of her own career, and she was for a number of years involved as a planner. So she was working in First Nations communities with a planning company that she helped co-found, and they were doing comprehensive community planning for First Nation communities. And she realized after a number of years of doing the work and having to navigate how do diverse people and communities that are facing a lot of different issues, how do we have conversations? How do we bring everybody to the table and get their contributions? And she realized that the community plans that made it to the end of the process and had the most buy-in from community members at the end were the ones where nobody felt like their voice wasn't heard, or where their perspective wasn't let out of the final plan. And that also means too that like there might have had to be some give and take between all of the different people with their different views, but nobody felt like they were completely excluded from the discussion or from the output. So she formalized a framework, and it is inspired and heavily influenced by some of the governance teachings of her people. And she built it in a way that it could still be approachable and adaptable to people who weren't from her community. And there's Indigenous communities are navigating overlapping historical and colonial harms and traumas that continue to today. And that's also why the framework is really trauma aware and trauma informed, because how people show up in a room, we mentioned, we are carrying our human experiences with us. And I also think that these skills are really valuable for, like I said, every member of society to cultivate. And this just isn't work that Indigenous people need to do. We all experience some form of harm or suffering in our lives. It's definitely different, and it's disproportionate depending on what you look like or how you've been racialized. And I like to use the example of it's beneficial for all of us to become trauma aware, because I have friends and I know people who've been involved in first responder work. And I know that even vicarious trauma is something that really affects people. It's not something that happened to us personally, but witnessing what's happened to other people can be really harmful and have physical and mental consequences for people. But learning how to become aware of what trauma looks like, what some of these behaviors or how it might affect people's understanding or ways of showing up in relationship, it can be an incredibly important skill for everyone to learn. And even in terms of loss or grief, that can be a really traumatic experience for people to go through. It's heavily emotional depending on your relationship with whoever has passed. And in our modern society, like you're lucky if you get 3 or 5 days of bereavement leave. Yeah. And then you're expected to show back up to your life and fulfill all your obligations and like nothing happened. Yeah. And it's just, humans don't process emotions that fast. Like we don't. It's even if our HR departments would like it to be differently, we are emotional beings, and grief and loss can also be something that requires a lot more understanding and compassion when someone's navigating it. So if we can understand ways that help us show up for those people that are navigating different levels of trauma. It only helps to build a more caring and compassionate community or society.
Yeah, like you said, that safe space for people if they need more time or if they're having a rough time when they come back, to help them support them as much as you can, right? And give them the time they need is really important. So yeah, now I guess you're officially certified in teaching her that stuff, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so Elaine, she started, like I said, doing this in like the container of community planning.
Yeah.
And then she was receiving requests to teach the training in government ministries and private industry, different workplace organizations, to the point where she couldn't keep up with all of the demands for the work. And she decided to build this train the trainer model as part of finding some help in getting this work out to people. So the first year she set a goal to have 6 people certified in helping her take this work to their sectors or the relationships that they have in their own communities to just really help spread the work around. Yeah, her goal was to have 6 facilitators in her first year. And she's been doing it for 2 years now, and she has over 100.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really speaks, I think, to how much the framework really resonates as a topic for people and what we're navigating in our modern society now. Like, life just keeps speeding up and getting faster. And even in terms of like digital technologies at work, it can be very overwhelming. And I think it's important for us to have these moments together, even in a team training or a development session, where we remind ourselves that we're humans, right? Like, we're not automatons, we're not the bots in the computer, like we're actual humans on the other side of these technologies. So.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the idea of, like you said, the idea behind this is decolonization. We have a society that was built on colonization and is forcing multiple different people to try to assimilate into that system. But now I feel like in the last 10, 15 years, we've recognized this isn't good, guys. We can't do this. And it was bad before. Sorry, I just mean like it's more publicly recognized that we got to change something because this is not beneficial to a wide variety of people, which is really awesome.
And it's not sustainable.
No.
Like, this pace is not sustainable.
No.
If there's ways that we can understand how we build relationships and stay people, and it helps us navigate workplaces and community groups, why wouldn't we learn those skills?
Exactly. Right? So I know every situation is different, but if a organization or a company was looking to try to cultivate a safe space in their organization, what are some of the key steps you recommend people take?
Absolutely. First off, I think it's remembering that we're humans. And I think something that can be really impactful and important is to just build time and space into your day or your week to have informal conversations and connections with your team members. It's not realistic that we're all going to be best friends, but we can still learn about each other and cultivate just community member relationship. And that can go a long ways to you learn a little bit about someone and what's going on in their life, or maybe some unique experience they had that you didn't know about if you didn't have that extra 5 or 10 minutes at the lunch table, or you didn't make that kind of space on the front end of a Monday morning meeting to just go over how your weekend was. Elaine shares this as well, that she really started doing more informal team check-ins as a way to be a better leader and provide better sort of supervision and offering better support to her teammates. But what she realized is, as teammates developed better rapport with each other, she no longer had to take on that role herself.
Oh, interesting.
Because when folks were sharing, oh, my basement flooded and I had a really stressful weekend, I didn't sleep a lot. In her mind, she's okay, how do I show up for this staff member? How do I support them? She recognized that members of her team started to say, I have some space on Tuesday. If you needed help with that project, please let me know. So it also becomes a bit of, rather than leadership being top down, it becomes a bit of a, we watch out for each other.
It becomes part of the culture.
Yeah. And it becomes a lot more reciprocal, right? And that's not to say that that everybody's comfortable sharing all the things at work, but to a certain degree, it's quite natural. We're involved in community groups, or we all went to the Canada Day barbecue, or whatever it is. We live in a small town. And so I think too, building rapport is one way to do it. Another thing that's really important too is just ongoing personal development and training. I think too that there's no perfect framework that's going to solve all the problems. Cultivating safe spaces might not be the only kind of training that a workplace does, but if you remain curious and see what else might work for you. And I think it's this mindset of like, how do we stay curious about what we don't know versus just continuing down a path thinking that we know enough to just keep doing what we do, because our world is changing so fast.
Yeah.
Right? We know this. And I think this mindset of staying curious and being open about things that are different than what you are accustomed to is also like a really beneficial starting point. Because when you stay open and curious, you start asking questions. And usually those questions lead to the next question, to the next question,
Yep.
right? And so you're constantly able to build knowledge, and you can do that together as a team. When I facilitate in groups, I come into a workplace as an outsider and I'm there to share information, but ultimately it's about how does that team understand that information? How can they put it into context for them? Because once the afternoon is over and I'm gone, it's up to them to continue to talk about it and practice it and see how it evolves for the work they're doing and the ways that their team works. Right?
Exactly.
So it's also being open to being adaptable. How can you make it fit you?
Yeah.
That's a really great question versus just dismissing something because you think it won't work for you.
Exactly. Yeah. The theme of this episode is adapting and accepting change. Like change can be scary and it can be hard, but it is important to cultivate that safe space and make sure everybody's in that positive headspace that they can share and help the company and the organization grow, right? So
And move important work forward.
Exactly.
Right? I think no matter what you do for work, you're probably working on a really important topic or an issue and you're wanting to move it forward. And ultimately, I think too, this helps people move things along and problem solve. And that's really universal.
Exactly. So it's a tradition for this show. We talk about reconciliation. It's been a big topic the last, 10 so years. We even have Truth and Reconciliation Day now in Canada. How do you view the current reconciliation movement in Canada and how it's going in the Peace region specifically?
Specific to our region, I know that there's a lot more visibility around events that are happening, and I would encourage folks to support those events. Just this past weekend, it was the Spirit of the Peace Powwow, and I really make a point to try and just go and spend a couple of afternoons down there. It can be quite loud. I forgot my earplugs again, but it's really amazing. You get to see from tiny tots to elders, and just it's a display of Indigenous culture. And it's a really welcoming room. And it's great to know that things like that have a long history of happening. I think it's going on for 40 years or something, the announcer said. But more broadly, and I talk about this with a lot of humility too, I know there's diverse opinions about reconciliation and what it means. I think as a communicator, I have sat with it for a bit, and I really think like we need new ways to conceptualize this, new ways to think about this. In December coming up, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report and the issuing of the calls to action. And I think many people are only now or more recently starting to pay attention or slowly contemplating what this means to them in their personal life or even at work. And Elaine said in a talk last year on September 30th that Truth and Reconciliation is about hearing the stories that are being told and then taking different actions because of what you learn from those stories. And I think that's helpful. I think that really helps break down what this work is about. And when I think about reconciliation as well, I'm a bit of a word nerd, so I like to go to definitions. What does that word actually mean? And when you think about it in terms of accounting, reconciling your books, it's not something that just happens once.
No.
You don't take a look at your books and balance them off and then you're done forever and you don't have to do it. You don't get a certificate of completion.
Yep.
It's a consistent practice. It's something that you're watching and you're managing and you're making decisions and taking specific actions on based on what. And so I think too, it really helps to demystify what this work is. It's about keeping our eyes open and taking actions until things change. And until there's a balance between Indigenous people in this country and settler Canadians in terms of outcomes, until the statistics change and an Indigenous man is no more likely to be incarcerated than any other man, or until an Indigenous woman is no more likely to be harmed or killed than any other woman in this country, right? Yeah. In the context of this country, we have to keep learning and unlearning the ways that we show up.
Yep.
And the ways that we contribute to reconciling this history, this collective history. And it really motivates the work that I do as well, because being a Métis woman, I'm Indigenous and I'm also settler. And I feel I have a real responsibility to contribute to this work and to work towards achieving some sense of balance and some sense of equity based on both of the people that I come from.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
So as we wrap this up, I know there's still a lot more to talk about and a lot more you could discuss about. If people had questions or a business or organization wanted to reach out to you about potentially helping cultivate a safe space in their organization, how would people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my website is the best place. It's CatherineRuddell.com. Catherine with a C, spelled the long way.
I'll also put the link in the caption.
Exactly.
There.
You can reach out to me there. You can follow me on LinkedIn, my full name, my business name. I also just started a page on LinkedIn for my business, so Creatively Sustained or Catherine Ruddell. And then I also like to share on Instagram. So if you're looking for a bit more of the creative or the artsy stuff mixed in with the work that I do, you can follow me on Instagram. And that's just my full name as well, Catherine Ruddell.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me. I was a bit nervous to show up, but I'm really glad I did, because ultimately I think I'm a storyteller and we learn so much from each other's stories, and each of us has a story that's unique to us. And the more we feel comfortable and feel like we can model that it's safe to share our stories, the more we learn about each other. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much.